Today, on Truth Social, President Trump posted a tweet saying, subject to SEC approval, companies should no longer be forced to report on a quarterly basis, but rather on a 6-month basis. This will save money, allow managers to focus on properly run their companies. And did you ever hear the statement, China has a 50-year view on management of a company, whereas we run our companies on a quarterly basis? Well, I actually think this is a great idea, and let me explain why. First, quarterly earnings drives short-term thinking by businesses. It's a 90-day business cycle. And as you know, as clients of us, we tend to think of multi-year themes, but a company is forced to play that out every 90 days. The second is that privately held companies don't even have to report quarterly results. So it's creating a disadvantage for being publicly listed. I would say I don't know if that's what we want. We don't want private companies to say,
President Trump tweeted today on Truth Social, companies should be required to disclose every 6 months instead of every quarter, subject to SEC approval. Money will be saved. Managers will be able to concentrate and run their businesses effectively. And have you ever heard the saying that China has a 50-year perspective on business management, while we operate ours on a quarterly basis? Let me tell you why I think this is a really good idea. First, companies' short-term thinking is influenced by quarterly results. As our clients, you are aware that we often think of themes that span several years, but a corporation is compelled to play it out every 90 days. The second is that companies that are privately held are exempt from reporting quarterly results. Therefore, being publicly listed is putting one at a disadvantage. I'm not sure whether that's what we want. I would say, since private corporations are exempt from reporting earnings every 3 months, we don't want them to claim that they would like to remain hidden. Third, quarterly reporting is costly and time-consuming. It takes up a lot of time for analysts and takes up a lot of time for a firm since the CFO sits in a room. Additionally, I believe it's critical that people concentrate on the larger plot arc. Actually, I'm in favor of this move. In addition, we'll be looking at the NAHB Housing Index and August retail sales tomorrow, or Tuesday. The FOMC rate decision and the Manheim Used Vehicle Index are released in the morning on Wednesday. Additionally, the Street is seeking 25 basis points. I think that's dovish. Remember, the Street expects 2.7 cuts by year-end, nearly 3 times the Fed's 2. That seems dovish to me. As previously stated, September 1998 and September 2024 were the last 2 occasions when the Fed was placed on hold and made a September cut. Additionally, the performance of the Russell and NASDAQ in 1998 is displayed here. In comparison to the S&P, you wanted to own the NASDAQ in September 1998. As you can see, we're seeing it play out with Nvidia this morning. Speaker Johnson, the American agenda has a tendency of causing some reaction against some American firms. We just heard from the CEO of Nvidia about an item that was published in the Financial Times today, stating that Chinese authorities had instructed Chinese enterprises to stop using and purchasing chips from Nvidia. The orders they have are to be canceled. It's most likely due to the ongoing trade negotiations and the national security concerns that are being discussed between the two nations. When Jensen Huang says, we can only be in service of a market if a country wants us to be, he expresses disappointment, but also notes that there are more important issues for the U.S. and China to resolve. What would you say to American businesses that conduct business abroad and in China, and who ultimately suffer financial losses as a result of our current actions? That hasn't been initiated by American provocations, though. In other words, China has the right to complicate these relations or start a trade war if it so chooses. However, we must take China seriously, and we do. The Congress and the administration are aware that China has been attempting to turn into a peer-to-peer rival of the United States for a considerable amount of time. To be honest, we're competing with them in a lot of areas, including artificial intelligence and the development of new technologies. Furthermore, China is an unfair commercial partner. They're a communist government, after all. Our intellectual property is stolen by them. U.S. trademark law and other elements that constitute fair trade agreements are completely ignored by them. Therefore, the strained relations are not the fault of the United States. China is to blame for it. Additionally, there are numerous intricate negotiations underway. Their actions in the Indo-Pacific region worry us. The free nations there and everywhere else in the world are our responsibility. This worry is also shared by our partners worldwide. Thus, we are competing with them. We need to resolve that, as I believe it is a highly detrimental development for what they have revealed with Nvidia. Could we talk about TikTok? I understand that nobody is yet fully aware of all the specifics of this. I'm not sure whether you've been briefed, but it's clear that Congress approved the measure, which President Biden signed into law, stating that TikTok would either have to divest or be shut down in the U.S. Do you have any idea how the logistics will operate? Will we be aware of the algorithm's contents? Will American engineers be able to view the algorithm and what we're being fed, even if we're licensing it from them? I'm not familiar with those specifics, but I can assure you that Congress is very concerned. Due to the platform's risk, we voted in favor of the divestment mandate. It's been abused and mishandled. To be honest, it has been used against American teenagers specifically, overwhelming their feeds with this extremely harmful content. At one point, they were encouraging young adolescent girls to commit suicide. Really, it's a risky situation. And I believe that congressional leaders have conveyed our want and our urge that stop. I thus hope that the conditions of this new agreement achieve that intended outcome. However, as you mentioned, I haven't yet seen the specifics. As a result, Nvidia's stock has dropped over 3% today. This follows reports that Chinese authorities have prohibited domestic IT firms from purchasing Nvidia's latest artificial intelligence chips. Today's Tech Check focuses on Christina Parts, who keeps a careful eye on all of this for us. Christina. Regards, David. Beyond earlier imports of Nvidia's H2O chips, which are manufactured exclusively for China, China's restriction explicitly targets a chip known as the B40. All you need to know is that China is the only market for these chips. According to the FT ByteDance, Alibaba and other behemoths received orders to stop testing and cancel tens of thousands of chip orders. As David noted, this is the reason why shares are down nearly 3% on the news. I'm disappointed with what I see, but they have larger agendas to work out between China and the United States. CEO Jensen Huang said in a press conference earlier this morning in London. The Nvidia CEO also mentioned that he expects the subject to come up during his conversation with President Trump tonight. Sources in the chip business claim that China's action demonstrates a great deal of trust in both domestic manufacturing and chips. China is only taking this action because they think their domestic factories can develop enough AI chips to satisfy demand. Therefore, having substitute items isn't the only thing at stake. It has to do with production capability. It is not possible for Beijing to take this action and then change its mind by claiming that they are unable to create enough chips. China is actively pursuing independence in semiconductors in order to compete with Nvidia's goods. They are marketing homegrown substitutes such as Huawei's Ascend 910B chip, since they are unable to obtain the most cutting-edge tools from firms like ASML. China is also apparently creating its own lithography equipment. Although Chinese chip manufacturers are improving, they still lag years behind the world's most sophisticated semiconductors. Mizuho and numerous other sell-side studies support this. However, the ban prevents Nvidia from making a significant amount of money. Even while the business is expanding rapidly abroad, better trade ties may eventually result in an annual increase in sales from China of between $15 and $20 billion. It is almost nil at the moment. We will be moving some of the committee stocks. Guys, Tesla is up after Elon Musk said that he had purchased nearly $1 billion worth of shares. You both own it, Joe and Brandon. Since this was your last trade on Thursday of last week, Joe, I'll start with you. I kind of wanted to explain to the audience what we were experiencing. So I mentioned this as a last transaction and stated it is a trade. This is going to make Steve cringe. If you are a company analyst who focuses on the basics, you will be horrified by what I am about to say. But pay attention, I admire your approach. I admire your perspective on markets. Respect my perspective for a moment as I'm giving an explanation. I am outlining for you the current market implementation of trend-following systems, and they are real. They have a strong effect. Therefore, if you look at Tesla's stock, as I previously indicated, only 44% of analysts have a buy rating on it. The stock gaps above 340 on September 4th. At that time, your trigger indication is when the stock gaps above 340. Why? Because the moving averages are also appearing for the first time at the same moment as that. Britain knows what I mean when I say that the 50, the 100, it surpasses the 200-day. So, this occurs at the same time. All right? Now, the stock never returns to 344 the rest of the week following September 4th and 5th. What is seated above you? Your high on May 29th is 367. Everyone that respects the price is aware of that and is currently aiming for the breakout at that level. And that's precisely what took place. This action is a classic example of momentum. I apologize to the viewers who are looking for a basic explanation. And you know what? After all of this actually happened, Elon Musk purchased his stock on Friday. Thus, it is a quintessential illustration of a potent confluence of technical factors at work. Additionally, when you examine the Mag 7,